Hello, welcome. My name's Quentin Langley and I'm the moderator of Heterodox New York City community, but you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from our distinguished panel. We're starting with ANDREA VALENTE, we're moving on to Justin KALEF, and then on to JILLIAN MEYER, and they will introduce themselves, so I'll shut up. So,
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very honored to be here for the first time in the conference, and also to be on the first day and on the first here, the panel here to open it. So I feel really, really honored. I'm coming from Canada. I work at York University as a contract faculty, and I'm there like usually in the Faculty of Education. So I joined the Heterodox Academy in Canada. So I have my group from Toronto where we usually meet. And the part of my presentation here today was part that I introduced to them. So I had the kind of draft for them. And what I'm bringing as completely new is that I have developed an app as a part of this reflective toolkit, which I hope I can demonstrate to you. It's also ongoing, it's also under development. So any feedback is really appreciated. I'm not a programmer, I'm not in tech, I have no skills, it's just curiosity to see how I could put it, questions to promote, to provoke our thoughts into an app, because the younger generation is much more into the tech. So with no further ado, I will start it. The objectives, as I said, is to demonstrate this belief shifting app that I have designed, that's ongoing. The idea is to raise awareness of our own beliefs, because I think that's very important that we start reflecting and thinking of how we feel and how we thought, and then think that this is one of the first steps. So the app will be just an initial step for further conversations. My interest in developing this becomes from 2 pointers here. Is that one, I was thinking why certain people, certain groups become more vulnerable to certain ideologies and ideas and others not. And the other thing is I'm an instructor, a teacher for over some decades. So I was thinking that how can I keep helping my students to raise their awareness. I worked in higher education, also with TAs, like supporting TAs before, and that was something that I had it in my mind. How could I help them that they could develop their critical thinking? And then there are my hypotheses here about this, for these 2 questions. And I'm not going to explain all of them here because there wouldn't be enough time. But the one that I wanted to focus is about the core beliefs, it's about our belief systems, because this is where the app that I have, design focus on. But at the same time, we cannot forget that it's not only about your core beliefs, but also, if we are not having our needs met, or if we are, being brought up in rigid groups, these things will also influence. But my focus here is on the core beliefs. So I will skip those slides just in case you have questions. And I will focus then belief studies, because this has been really, a topic very, very widespread in the teachers' colleges. So probably you're familiar with it as well. And see, for the past 20 years, the interest in studying about pre-teachers, pre-server teachers' beliefs, so has been really strong, and so many papers on this topic. So why is that? Why is this such a topic, a hot topic, right? To try to understand the new teachers' ideas and beliefs in terms of education, in terms of interactions, and so on. So at the same time, we understand that the core belief is very much close connected to indoctrination. And what does it mean? That if you have a very much rigid core beliefs, your beliefs, and you cannot change, means that you've been indoctrinated. And from neuroscience has also been interested in this topic of indoctrination, and there is this interesting paper from Luca Armstrong from 2020 that says that if this is indoctrination, we are all indoctrinated. Yes, we all, ideologies come with our socialization, first with our parents, what their belief systems can, in terms of life, in terms of spiritual life, and then from school, and then from the friends, our communities. So we are, but what is the problem of the beliefs is when they are monolithic, when they are biased, and when they are so much ingrained in yourself that you cannot really have other conversations and start thinking and reflect on your own. So we all been familiar here with Professor Harder's work here, and his work has been on YouTube and has been all over, and also talking about parts and reasons that certain groups take so that certain ideas are shared or spread because of group interest. And that is something that as educators we should be cautious and aware of, not being partisan of one idea, but trying to share with the students many ideas, the pluralism that we just heard. And this is, I think, that we need to explore more in the classroom. Now, I'm bringing here an example that happened the other day on the X with a Canadian journalist, because one of these strong beliefs or ideologies is the DEI, as you know, and it's really impacting many people's lives because now finding jobs or being hired, you have to go through that, and it's not what you can bring as your skills, your knowledge, and your credentials. So there was this case here of this journalist in a conversation with a person on the platform saying that, well, you would cross all the boxes in this DI, but I am a white guy, I can't. And she said, no, it's not true. I can check all the boxes, true, but except one. That's the ideology, because I don't share this ideology that is this current ideology that's been on campus at the universities and in the organizations. So it's not only about the I in terms of race, in terms of gender, or in terms of belief, in terms of spirituality, but also in your ideas. So this is important because if you have these very rigid beliefs, you're having a kind of idea that's closed-mindedness, and then you want to be able to grow. So I really like the work from Carol Dweck's, that you may be familiar with the growth mindset, because what you need is an open mind, is being able to have an inner conversation with ourselves, and even sometimes to defend our points. We don't need to keep changing all the time, but also to be able to change when you think is the time for you. So then it takes me to the next question, which is about raising self-awareness, self-inquiry, and this leads me to the toolkit in a moment. As part of being in the Faculty of Education, we are usually very much familiar with reflexivity models, which you usually use with TAs, with students, in which we have the lived experience. It's all about what you experience. How did you feel when you were doing, or when you were teaching, and when you were learning? And then you describe the context, and then from there, what's going to be your action plan. So this is common. This is Kolb's, that is an example that's very much useful. and I wouldn't say it's not. And there are different models on lived experience, but I think they can also be improved, because those models were, kind of John Dewey's legacy about experiential learning. But we also have to think, what else can we do? So I'm bringing here a theory together, all right, with this idea of reflection that is by active inference model from Carl Freestone. This is more in neuroscience. I'm not expert in neuroscience, but I'm trying to understand a little bit. And the idea is that our brain is like, a predictive machine, and then we need to keep updating so that we can adapt to the environment. So there is this model here that we look at the world and we try to adapt, we try to predict, and if the prediction goes right, you keep that that habit, that practice. If it's not, you revise it, and then you try again and see. We wanted to avoid surprise, as they say, to minimize the free energy in their language. So the idea is to create awareness of our implicit biases, including the ideological ones, and encourage our update of our beliefs based on evidence and based on openness to this confirmation. So the toolkit then is to enhance and to raise metacognitive and emotional beliefs awareness. And the point that I would like to show here in this app is on the pedagogical beliefs. And you have it here, you can scan, you can try. You're free, I invite you to try. And I'm going to show to you what is the app's about. I'm going to go to the next slide, in which I have a screenshot. I wasn't sure if we would have, yes, you would need your phone. Yes? Oh, it's doing it, sorry. Okay, sorry. Oh, maybe I should move. Thank you. So my next slide is what I have. This was in progress, and now I have also logged in myself here before. So I'm going for you. So in my slide, it's not updated because I've been trying to update. I could figure out how to put like an introduction. And here you can see it's, I don't think you can see here. If you are in the apps, for example, you can see an introduction. All right, what is this about? It's, as I said, an interactive tool to help university instructors to engage in metacognitive awareness. And in a way, trying to summarize what I'm saying here. Instructors are invited to input, reflect, and revise their beliefs. That is to externalize internal models, examine your beliefs, your models, and also to acknowledge emotions, because sometimes we just forget about emotions. Emotions are sometimes very tied to our beliefs. And then how we can develop this epistemic flexibility. If you are in the app, you can see, not from here, because from here I couldn't really have just the screenshots, but the ones that are in the apps with me, you can move to the belief shifting. And the belief shifting, you have like my colleagues here that were trying to see if it was working. And then if you go to belief shifting form, and there is a plus on the right corner, on the right corner, there is a plus where you can click, and then there is a form where you're going to fill in. So what is this about? It's a simple, in a way here, is state your belief. What category is your belief about? where does this belief come from? From reference, from books, from your teacher, from your colleagues, from your community. So where does it come from? From your lived experience. And then what's your confidence level? How confident are you in this belief? And then have you been challenged recently? And if you were, how would you describe that challenge? What happened that now you are thinking, well, I used to believe this way, now somebody's challenging me. So to what extent I'm open to change myself? And then if I open to change, what would be the change in my belief? So the student or the teacher would write about it. And here, they could keep it private or share. Right now, this feature is not really working as I wanted, but that would be the idea. This is more like a prototype. And what emotion, do you associate with this? And then you would submit. Once you submit, it would show there. So I have the screenshots here so that, in case you can not access. And I'm now developing a long form where you can also click on the add, where it's a similar form, but this form now is trying now to keep a more interactive, that you keep in a way more in connection with your belief, and trying to be like in a journal. If you wanted to keep updating every week, for example. So the idea here is to keep it more interactive. If you're using groups, you could use it and revisit and update it and to edit. So the idea is to use in group in a classroom, for example, a pre-serve with teachers or with TAs, so that instead of just having a list of questions to think about your beliefs and if you would change or not, this would be more ongoing. It's more dynamic and also more dialogic. So I'm also having here a feature that we have users, as you can see there. So that could be an idea, so that if you have different instructors, they could have their profile. I'm just trying now to move here, but it's not working. I want to pass here to my next slide. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so just final remarks here about this belief shifting toolkit. And I invite you, if you can, just to look, and you can email me if you have any suggestions. There are lots of things that I needed to improve, for sure, but it's this idea that I really wanted to develop further. So I would say that this toolkit is just a starting point to start navigating through open-mindedness, beliefs updating, self-awareness, dialogue, cognitive emotional reasoning, ideologies demystification, and virtual responsibility. The idea is to have this internal and external dialogue in groups. I think that would be, in a way, a supporting group, so that you would feel that, we all have our own beliefs, but, and how can we challenge ourselves, change or not, or sometimes to defend and create arguments based on evidence, based on reasoning, to defend ourselves. And sometimes we cannot, because we are attached with emotions, and those emotions are not enabling you to see ahead. Okay, so I just finishing here my presentation. This is the bibliography, and thank you very much. And I think you have the slides available. Thank you.
I'm Justin. I teach philosophy at Rutgers, and I'm this talk is a bit of a. I'm fortunate enough to have just been granted a sort of split sabbatical to write a book that I've been thinking of for a long time about the fallacies. The motivation for the book, even though you might not know me, I think a lot of you probably know Jonathan Rauch's book, Constitution of Knowledge, fantastic book that sets out, like, I mean, there's so many books now that are advocating for things that are similar to what we're doing at Heterodox Academy. And Jonathan Rauch does a great job of saying why it's important to have a constitution of knowledge, a set of rules and principles for the institutions that create knowledge. So that, actually, I would say, so that we can have knowledge at all, because otherwise we have opinion and not knowledge. So I think one way of thinking about what I'm doing in my book is I'm trying to create I guess a structured set of a systematic set of fallacies and a description of exactly what the fallacies entail, so that we can go a bit more fine-grained than what Rauch does in his book. But there are two different things. First of all, if one is committed to this, to free and open and rational inquiry, what rules should one follow in discourse? And the other thing is, if one is not committed to those rules, why should one get involved? So I'm addressing both those things together. And the three tools that I'm picking out for protecting the heterodox way in academia are, I guess, three things that I'm picking out from my set of, I guess, my set of tools, my toolkit, that I think might be interesting to look at. So the larger project. A lot of people, a lot of logicians and philosophers for a few decades now have criticized the fallacies approach, because they say, look, a lot of the logical fallacies, like, for example, begging the question or straw man, they can't be reduced to any logical fallacies, so they're not clear fallacies of a priori reasoning. They also don't seem to be statistical errors. Is there any way, and so they say that this isn't really proper logic at all. It's not inductive, it's not deductive logic. I'm thinking of this as of reasoning as a game worth playing, and I'm approaching it from the perspective of finding a game worth playing, which may seem a little bit strange because we're talking about some very serious things, and some people might say, well, why are we approaching it like a game? I hope I can explain this. This is a lesson. I'll begin with a lesson that I took from a conversation that I had with a friend of mine in high school, Bo, who liked to play chess with me sometimes, and he said, we should try a variation of it where the knights can make two hops instead of one. So in any time that you move a knight, you can move the knight 2 turns instead of 1 turn. So he called this variation double hop knights. So all the rules are just as in ordinary chess, except that a knight may make either 1 or 2 standard knight moves on any turn. So white, as usual, plays first. I don't want to spend too much time on this, and some of you might not play chess at all, but what is white's best move in the starting position? We played around with it for a while, and I suddenly discovered there are actually 2 very good moves, knight to b5 or knight to c4, both of which give checkmate. So in this game, white can immediately win the game. There's nothing that black can do. It. Our friend Colin at a party, he wanted to know all the rules before he played double hop knights, and it took ages to explain the rules, and he had all these questions, and then we said, okay, checkmate. And he wasn't very happy. Anyway, so double hop knights is not a game worth playing. So chess, when you got double hop knights, it's not a game worth playing. This is something anybody should be able to see who plays chess or even understands, even if you don't play chess, even if you don't even know the rules of chess, if you understand that chess is a game that people play, you would be able to see that this is not a game worth playing. That's because there are constraints on what makes chess a game. A game like chess should give both players a fair chance of winning. That violates that constraint. And it should generally allow the stronger player to beat the weaker player. It's not a game of chance. It's a game that you want to become good at. That you can't really become good at double hop knights once both sides know the trick. There are other rule-governed activities that are not as frivolous as a game of chess or double hop knights chess. And they can also be made better or worse by the addition of good or bad rules. So we can also think of these as games worth or not worth playing. One example is driving. I mean, this seems to be something that's an activity worth doing. We have a lot of rules for driving. And you might say, well, aren't those rules to some extent arbitrary? Because in some countries in the world, people drive on the left side of the road, and here in America, we drive on the right side of the road. And it seems that either one is okay as long as people agree to the rule. So aren't these just arbitrary rules? You can't derive these rules from pure logic. But there are some rules that would make driving worse. So one example, unlimited parking. Anyone may at any time use any part of any public road as a parking spot. So that adds a new permission, but if that were, I mean, then it would always be convenient to just stop on various roads. Why not? And then you couldn't drive anymore. Or a second example, this is a restriction, no peeking. No driver of any vehicle may peek outside the window of that vehicle or use any device to get information from outside that vehicle. I think if you added either of these rules, it would just be better to not have driving at all. So it's true that the rules of driving are somewhat arbitrary. For instance, we can decide whether to have a rule requiring everyone to drive on the right or a rule requiring everyone to drive on the left. That is arbitrary, but if we didn't have any rule saying that you had to drive on one side or the other, and people just picked whichever side, that would make things worse. So in some cases like that, it's better to have a rule. It doesn't matter so much which one you have. And if the unlimited parking and no peeking rules were added, driving would no longer be a game worth playing. And this is because such rules would be poorly suited to the purposes of driving. The purpose of driving is to allow us to get from one place to another easily, while avoiding harm to ourselves and others and damage to our cars, and all the while it should make the process as pleasant and simple as possible. So, more to the point, reasoning, I say, is another game worth playing, and it requires us to agree to rules. Whether or not we can derive such rules from pure logic, they must further the ends of reasoning. Here are some of the ends of reasoning. We want to discover the truth, so truth-seeking rules are things that facilitate the seeking of truth are good, and rules that would make it harder to discover the truth are bad. We also want to promote the truth and reduce falsehood among those who care about it, and we want to be able to reasonably resolve conflicts. Sometimes that has nothing to do with determining the truth. For example, how should we decide who does the dishes? Are we going to take turns? Is it going to be a flip of the coin? There's not necessarily a fact of the matter that we're trying to discover, and yet we can reason things through and say, okay, this is a system that would work pretty well. Okay, so here is, again, Jonathan Rauch's model. Those two great books, on his model, we can generate a good system of rules for social reasoning from two fundamental principles. He famously said that one could derive all the rules we need from one, no one gets final say. In other words, there's no person who's so authoritative that he or she can just say, well, this is the fact of the matter, and everybody just has to agree. You can always ask further questions and raise further objections, and nobody has personal authority. What one person contributes to the conversation would be just as good as if some other person had contributed the same thing to the discussion. My fundamental rule that I'm starting from is a meta rule, a rule about rules that is slightly upstream from this. So the fundamental rule of my whole system is one that will explain, as I'll show you in a moment, how we could derive Rauch's two rules. And it's simply the golden rule of reasoning, as opposed to the familiar golden rule of ethics. This is what I'm using to describe the rule that we should never employ any mode of reasoning that we would not be willing to have our opponents use against us. Very simple. So some applications from Rauch. Would you agree to allow your opponent final say in your disputes? I think almost anybody would say, no, I would not be willing to have that happen. I would also not agree to treat my opponent's pronouncements as authoritative. So by the golden rule of reasoning, I cannot use those methods for my side. Of course, he wouldn't allow those things. Either of those rules would give an automatic victory to whoever pulls the move first, which should seem familiar. It's just double hop nights for conversation. So now I have a skeptical question. I'm imagining this person, I know the writing is so small. This person is doubtfully saying, but why should I follow the golden rule of reasoning? Now, we might say, well, look, first of all, you're a genuinely curious person. You'd like to know the truth, wouldn't you? I mean, don't we all? And also, you have rudimentary, at least, intellectual integrity. You don't want to follow rules that other people, doesn't it sort of clear? And because you care more about being reasonable than about seeming reasonable. And those things, I think, would persuade all of us. But it wouldn't persuade this person, because this person says, but you see, I'm incurious, shallow, and unprincipled. And moreover, what I happen to believe is currently socially dominant. So there. Now, this is an unfortunate case, And yet, you may have discovered that we do have to deal with these people sometimes. So, what then? So what do we do? Here's one thing we could do. We could ignore this person and hope that he'll be condemned or ignored by the others. We've all tried that, probably. In fact, I think these people are probably, unfortunately, the majority of intellectuals, even forgetting about regular people, because there are so many motivations that get people to want to believe what everybody else believes, and often people feel morally elated by how great their beliefs are once they've accepted them, and they don't want to. They have all kinds of reasons for not wanting to listen to other people, and so. These things are always going to be very popular. One of the things that motivated this was, like so many people, I was concerned about how over the last however many years, all these institutions that we care so much about seem to be getting captured by a certain ideology, and we kept thinking, when are people going to rise up and take them back? And then, of course, what happened was finally people are taking them in a different direction, and it looks, there's this worry now: are we just going to be stuck with one ideology capturing some institutions and then the other one fighting back? But the views that the people that are capturing, I'm getting too excited. The people who are capturing one way or the other, they're just extreme forms of it. They're never going to be the intelligent views, and that's because most people don't want to be thoughtful. So unfortunately, these are going to be a lot of people. So this is not a good response, I don't think. Foolishness and shallowness have always been very popular. I think they always will be. We could reason with this person until he sees the value of fair reasoning. But good luck. That's what I said about that. So such people will seldom budge when they are on top. And also, if the zeitgeist shifts a bit, since they're deeply unprincipled, they will believe and say whatever they must in order to join the dominant group. So, when equally shallow, unprincipled people at last fight back with power, so if you have two different factions fighting against each other, as we have right now, then finally, those of us who commit to fair reasoning can win the day by presenting a principled alternative to the ugliness of war. And I think that when you look at the Enlightenment and when you look at all the times that things have become really good, it's come in the wake of two big groups, Catholics and Protestants, or whichever groups fighting against each other, fanatics on both sides, people who won't back down. And finally, at those points, people say, I'm sick and tired of all the fighting, and I want something else. And then even though the people in the middle who are ready to think it through are always in the minority, at least people say, I can see the attraction of this. And then finally, things can start getting better. We can build good liberal institutions. And then if we ever are successful in getting rid of the problem, the next generation will completely forget. And then we'll have to do it all over again because they can't imagine things being as bad as they sometimes get. So this is maybe our moment. I'm sad to say that this is how I think it is. As I say, as soon as the ugly war ends, the stupid and unprincipled will forget that it happened. We need to begin again. Even now, though, a problem follows. Imagine this. Somebody says, because of who I am, you must not question what I say. This is somebody that Rauch would respond to. Imagine I say, sorry, that is unacceptable. I follow the golden rule of reasoning. And, oh, what, you reject my mode of reasoning? Yes. Well, then I reject your golden rule in response. Turnabout is fair play. Okay, so what happens then? So some people say, well, and you see this a lot, people say, well, this sort of rational Western blah, blah, blah way of thinking is one perspective, but that we also have these other perspectives. But I think that one thing that's important, thank you, is that this is a kind of double counting. It's as if I were to say, okay, let's suppose that there's a shortage of water, and it's a hot day, so we all want water, and maybe there are just enough cups for all of us, and just enough water for all of us, and maybe all of you would like to have a whole bunch of water, but you know that we're committed to working it out that we're going to play fair, and so you say we're going to have 1 cup of water each, and I say, oh well, from my perspective is I get all the water, so I'm not committed at all to playing fair. Now, if I say, so my perspective should be balanced against yours, so you should all get half a cup of water, and I get all the rest of the water, which is sort of a halfway point between my view and your view. But the problem is, you've already given up on taking all the water because you're ready to play fair, and I'm not. And so we can't treat people being people who have already committed to playing the game, to following the golden rule, with the views that come from people who haven't played the golden rule. So there's an inequality. A fundamental inequality there, and I think that I guess I only have time to say one more thing, so I won't get to the third possibility. But there's an interesting thing here. For example, one of the logical fallacies is the ad hominem attack. So is it legitimate to dismiss an argument that somebody gives or a claim that somebody makes on the basis of who that person is? I would say generally no. So in most cases, if the person is making an argument, we have to consider the argument as it is. But what if the person is just making a claim, and we have to make the claim on the basis of whether we trust the speaker or not? If we have to decide on that basis, I think we need to say we can sometimes take facts about the person into account. For example, we could I don't know, like let's say the person is really committed to let's say that I tell you in advance that I'm committed to a certain conclusion about the issue that is under discussion, and I'm not willing to change my mind about that. In fact, I swear an oath before I even look at the evidence that I'm going to come to a certain conclusion. Then I think it's possible to rule me out rule out my claims from further consideration, or at least be very, very skeptical about them. Whereas I don't think the same thing applies when it comes to moves that are, when it comes to things that are not a part of the game. So if I have some really wacky view on something else, or if I've done some terrible thing, regardless, even a serial killer should be able to contribute to the to the development of knowledge. But I think that important things start to happen for reasons I don't have time to explain when we. Let me put it this way. I think the important thing is to distinguish things that are genuinely relevant to following the golden rule from things that are not following the golden rule. And often these things are counted as equivalent, just as in the same way that a decision that somebody has made on the basis of a commitment to fairness about water should not be weighed against an individual's desire to have water, to have all the water, when that individual is not already committed to the golden rule. So I haven't had time to explain very much of this, but if you'd like to hear more, you can come and see me, and thanks for your attention.
All right, I'm gonna set up my little timer up here so I can keep track of time. Hello, everybody. My name is JILLIAN MEYER. I'm a PhD student at Indiana University, Bloomington. I am in the social psychology and cognitive science program, so a dual program there. And I specialize in moral psychology, so I'm speaking to you in terms of viewpoint diversity as a psychologist. So we're going to be talking about assessment tool and learning about your morality, how your values can differ from others, that kind of stuff. Two of the things that I'm going to try to remember to reiterate throughout the presentation that are my biggest priorities with this work. First of all is that it's interdisciplinary. So I'm a psychologist, but when you study morality, tons of different disciplines have done work on it, all from different perspectives. And so incorporating the different ways that people have studied morality is super important to me. So I'm not just focusing on that psychological side, but also, as you'll see, like cultural things or biological, etc. And then the other thing is that I like my work to have a really wide appeal. So that's academics like all of us, but then also people outside of academia. Because I can talk to you all about moral psychology and literature, and this is all very natural to you, but I walk into a classroom of people, you know, who I'm actually wanting to try to convince of this stuff, and it's a little different. It's harder for them to stay engaged and to really understand everything. So those are two of my priorities and why the viewpoint diversity thing is so important to me, because I love my work to be both interdisciplinary and to reach as many people as possible. So for a little demonstration, a little intro as promised, I have a little video. I love this scene in South Park. It's the first, I love South Park, by the way, all these cartoon shows, it's my thing. But as soon as I saw this clip in South Park, I was like, this is going in a presentation. It's so good about viewpoint diversity. So hope you enjoy. And I think I have to click out, actually. Here we go.
All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming out to protest the war. Good. Don't kid yourselves. These people have come out to support our troops, right? And now, Randy Marsh is going to sing a protest song he wrote about the war. Oh, no, you don't. We're doing our pro-war song first.
Yeah. The last thing these people want is another bleeding heart rock protest song.
People, I told you, you have to share the stage.
Nobody wants to hear another pro-war country song. Well, excuse me if I'm a little bit country. Well, I'm a little bit rock and roll. I'm a little for supporting our troops. And I'm I'm a little for bringing them home. I believe freedom isn't free. No, but war shouldn't be our goal. We must defend our country. If it means war, then we say no. Yeehaw! Did you forget them towers in New York? Did you forget how it made you feel? See them towers come down. Were you like me? Did you think it weren't real? I like to rock, but I don't want to rock, I rock.
It's cool with that applause in there as he started.
The kind of rock in America should do is the kind that we can all dance to. Yeah. We got GPS, ICBMs, and good old-fashioned lead. We're gonna show Saddam what America means. That son of a bitch will be dead. Why are we fighting this war? There's a man in the office we didn't vote for. They didn't give me a choice. War is not my voice. Yeah!
Oh, so great. Yeah, I was not alive, if you can't guess, during the Vietnam War, but I feel I resonate with it still a lot as I watch it. There's some similar stuff going on.
The war is completely behind us now.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. I wasn't caught up on that war. Good. Okay, but you can see when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, what is more heterodox than that? All right, let's get going. You put a clicker somewhere. There we go. So, political polarization, obviously, that's what we're talking about. In terms of that video, you guys know the drill here. Republicans and Democrats are divided. There we go. So I could stand here and I could tell you about the research of psychology, looking at, you see, these are in-group evaluations. So what Democrats think about Democrats, Republicans. And then these are your out-group evaluations, what Democrats think about Republicans and vice versa. You can see the trend is going down. Again, I don't need to explain this to you guys. You know what this is all about. But something that I find really interesting about this is that we're very polarized effectively, emotionally, but we don't actually have a good idea of what the other side believes. So this is where it gets interesting to me. You have this thing called the perception gap, some really cool research by Daniel Yudkin in part of More in Common, if you've heard of that. So over here, you can see these are actual Republicans' views, Republicans when they took this survey, and then these are Democrats where they think the Republicans would score. And then also over here, where Democrats scored when they took the test, and then where Republicans thought Democrats would score. So just right off the bat, you can see like the bigger this perception gap, the farther away they are from actually being able to predict what people would say in the survey. So for example, something like racism still exists in America. How much do you believe that that's true? So actual Republican views, you can see over 75% said yes. Democrats estimating what Republicans would say, they estimated only about 50%. So you're missing a quarter of the people that you're just assuming you know what the views are. And it's the same thing over here, like, I'm proud to be an American. So actual Democrats, that was over 75%. Republicans thought that it was just at 50. So same thing on both sides we see, that we're assuming we know what other people would say, but really, we're not having the conversations to actually know what people think. All right, so like I said, two of my priorities here. I'm glad I have this slide in here. I want to keep remembering to mention it. Interdisciplinary work and wide appeal work. So this perception gap, it's not just in academia. It's not just in psychology. It's everywhere. So that's why I like this work being for everybody. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So for the wide appeal piece, the thing I want to point out here is that doing something where someone learns about their values and how those differ from other people, how they're similar, this is something that I don't have the psych literature on this or anything, but it seems like something that normal people like to do. So for example, I have this cootie catcher. I don't know if you guys did those when you were kids, but it was like you pick a color and a number and then you open it and it's like what boy you're gonna marry in the class or something. And so that's a lot of fun. It's just totally arbitrary though, right? Like we're learning about ourselves and it doesn't matter like if it's true or not. So why don't we build a tool where we are backing it up with empirical evidence and assessment tools so that people are really learning about themselves and getting, concrete information instead of just cootie catchers. But you're probably thinking, you know what? I was a kid back then. I don't play with cootie catchers anymore. I know that that's not real. I don't do stuff like this. This doesn't interest me. I like real solid tests that tell me who I am. But how many of you know your Hogwarts house who compare them with each other? Yeah, he was like, that's mine, that's mine. Yeah, you've got, what Friends character are you? Like all these BuzzFeed quizzes. Disney princess, I don't know, sir, if that's one that you also know, but what Disney princess are you? This is from the official Disney site. You know, you can go through and find out what princess you are. Horoscopes. Again, these BuzzFeed quizzes, eat 10 foods and I'll tell you the first letter of your soulmate's first name. Like this isn't something that it's like, how do we translate this academic research and make it interesting for people not in academia? This is the kind of stuff that people are looking for naturally. Like they like doing this stuff when it doesn't even mean anything. So how can we use our tools in higher education to make something that's really useful and that can help with the polarization problem? So here we go. This is a task. The first presentation was really interesting because I'm doing something similar that I'm going to talk about. And it's the same way where I'm like, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder, we're flying blind here, but we know this work has to be done. So pooling, if ever anybody's a programmer, hit either of us up. So a values-based assessment. We're learning about what our values are when we make moral decisions. So like I said, I like to be interdisciplinary, so I'm going to talk about the 4 disciplines that this assessment is going to cover. First of all, you've got anthropology. So this fits into that like cultural morality. So maybe you come in with being predisposed to have certain moral values or make certain decisions, but your culture, your environment is really going to impact that. So there's some cool anthropology work in Eastern and Western countries looking at this. And 2 of the biggest values that they found that differs across cultures is whether they're more autonomous or more communal. So do you prioritize kind of your individual rights and freedoms and success over the greater good of the community, or do you value the other? So they take this test and they see whether they make more autonomous or communal decisions. The next part, how do you talk about moral psychology and morality values without philosophy? Thank you for your work. But with the philosophy, I really like the piece that it brings in that's kind of about abstract morality. So you've got this cultural part, where you're from, your environment impacting how you make moral decisions, but then also kind of how you think about it abstractly. Do you think more in like universal principles, you should always do this, never do this? Or do you think about it more like the outcome, like whatever's best for everybody is what's the right decision to make? So you can see how even just representing these 2 disciplines, when we're talking about moral values, you've already got 2 sides of the picture. And a lot of measures right now, like they're made by anthropologists solely, and they focus on culture. They're made by philosophers solely, and they focus on philosophical concept and theory. But bringing this together, you really get a more full picture of moral decision making, because these decisions don't happen in a vacuum. All of these different values come together and impact the decisions that we make and the values that we have. Next up, we have the biological dimension. So that one comes from like the idea of a harm-based moral mind, or morality, moral sense theory by Darwin, that we kind of evolved these moral traits to help us in our survival, help our offspring survive. So you think about like the value of loyalty, like you want to be loyal to your in-group. That protects you, that protects your family. So then we have this sense of loyalty that feels moral to us, whereas betrayal feels something that's immoral. Because if we were to betray our tribe, our ancestors betray our tribe, that would hurt our chances of survival, our children's chance of survival, that kind of thing. And this is very kind of controversial almost when you're talking about morality, like the idea that it is inherent within us, that, you know, oh, like if we're all just out for our survival, like how can we change that? Like, is that always the right thing to do if we're just looking out for ourselves and making sure that we survive? But I think, again, it plays in with the other ones. And so you might make really harm-sensitive decisions until it comes in conflict with your anthropological values. And then you go away from your biological influences and side more with whatever your anthropological value is in your ethical decision-making. So again, it's pieces of the puzzle coming together. None of these disciplines, I think, represent an end-all be-all morality. That's why it's so important to me to have that diversity of views and work that people are doing. And then the final one, this is another one. How do you talk about morality without religion? This is also very controversial, especially in the philosophy world. I've gotten into many philosophers about whether religion has a place when you talk about morality or not. But I believe it is. There's psychology research about religious communities having more pro-social behaviors, and so it kind of teaches you morality, teaches you moral code, whether you really ascribe to a certain religion or you're just more spiritual. But so many people across cultures in the whole world base their moral codes off their religions. And so it's a very hard thing to just ignore, when for a lot of people, the reason they do what they do is because of their spiritual values. And I say spiritual because I don't want to just say religious. So like obviously someone who's religious would probably score more highly on the spiritual dimension. But for somebody who thinks like if you're agnostic, you don't believe in God, but you feel like fate is real, or you feel like, everything's going to work out in the end, that's kind of more of like a transcendent moral feeling or moral value. So putting all of these together, I think, is what really informs people of how they make moral decisions and how we go about this viewpoint diversity when all of these decisions lead to different ethical conclusions. How do we kind of reconcile those and say, okay, these are your values, you see, these are my values, so let's talk about that. And so that's what I see with this. I see it being used in like character education programming or viewpoint diversity programming. And what I like about it is that I can see it being used in so many ways. So you could have a one-day workshop where everybody takes this assessment and you're told what your highest values are, and then you have discussions on it. You talk about, well, what would you do in this situation if you had all the opposite values? Like, what would those decisions be? Can we understand those more? Partner, pair, and share, like, what did you have? What did you have? So how did you answer your questions differently because you prioritize these different values? But then also, like, it could be a 4-part workshop. And like the first part, you talk about the anthropological lens and you learn about that. And then the next workshop, you talk about diversity in biological views or biological morality. So I like it because it feels so versatile. Like it's a descriptive assessment, not telling you, are you a good person or a bad person? But when you tell people that you're doing some kind of moral values assessment, that's always what they think. And then they get even more excited about it. So you can kind of let them think like, oh, this is your morality test, but then, hook them in. Again, that wide appeal. Okay, what do I want to talk about next? So one more thing I want to bring up about this task. You're probably like, okay, she's talking about this task. What is a task? What does this mean? Like, what are you putting together? Like, that's the theory behind it, but what is the practical? What's going on? So a very popular critique that especially anthropologists and philosophers have of psychological research is that what we self-report, what we say we believe, what we say we value, like in just a standard kind of test, isn't always how we practically act when we're in the real world. So this task, again, because it's supposed to be interdisciplinary, and I don't want to say, yeah, well, I'm a psychologist and this is how we do things. I want to make it interesting. I want to make it fun. So, like I said earlier, I'm programming a task that's it'll be like a narrative storytelling structure. So you go through and you answer these different moral decisions, and they'll all have the representation of the different dimensions I talked about before with different moral valence weights. And so some of them will be like, it's this much autonomous versus this much communal, and then this much spiritual, this much secular in this one question, all of that compiled, and then reported at the end. So again, the idea that ethical decision making doesn't happen in a vacuum. All of these stuff are playing into each other, and that is what would be assessed with this test. So I think next up, I'm going to show you. This is, once again, not a coder, but we're figuring it out. This is a little preview. I think I have to click it, though. Oh, my gosh. This is a little preview of where the task was at the time that I made this presentation, which was last week, but it improves every week. And I've got a team of RAs that are also learning to code with me and that are doing stuff. So one of them made like a title screen the other day that it looks like a Minecraft opening title. I was like, what in the world? Like, I didn't teach you that. That's awesome. Oh, it says I can't download it. Okay, well, that's okay. We can move on from that. But basically, it's like, so you open it, and it's like this moral mission task, and then you create an avatar. So part of it is that you want it to feel really personal for people. You're not just like in a psychology lecture or something. Like, you make an avatar, so you see yourself as part of this story, connecting to that like narrative psychology storytelling literature when it comes to increasing empathy and stuff that's really important for constructive dialogue work. And so you make an avatar, you continue, and then it'll show you like the questions. Something I was excited about. First of all, I got the avatar to stay constant through all of the different scenes. And then I got it so that there was like a path that the avatar was jumping like when it through the different questions. So I got it to like move around like that. So like I said, every week we add a little something to it and get it a little further. But yeah, you can always ask me for more information or if you'd like to see. Do you see how excited I was? I've done this presentation lots of times and it's never been in a place where I could show the task and then it wasn't working, but you get the idea. Okay, so we're at the end already. That is the idea for the task. I know that is a lot of information. There's a lot going into it. It's very broad, but I like the broad nature because, like I said, there's so much different stuff you can do with it, so much that might be engaging for some people versus others. Like my research assistants, like I said, we're doing like deep literature reviews for all of these different dimensions and what they've done with morality. And some of them, like there's one that is an anthropology major, so she's really excited about that. There's one that is also studying religious studies, so she's really excited to learn about that. So again, it's broad, but it's a little something for everybody. We want it to be engaging, incorporate as many perspectives as possible, and have a good time while doing it, right? So I'm going to end you here with the ending clip. This is like my kumbaya, what's going to happen once we have this task, and it increases the viewpoint diversity. So enjoy our little closing video. Oh, yours wasn't working either. My first one went, and then the second. All right, y'all. Well, come and see me. Let me tell you how this all ends. It ends with everybody being like, oh, you're right. Okay, what is the line Cartman says? He says, like, it doesn't matter, like, basically, if you want the troops to come home or if you want the troops to defend America, like, either way, as long as we all agree that America kicks ass. And it's like, heck yeah. And then they sing a little song together. But I guess it's not going to let me show you my closing slide either. I have business cards if you want my information. Also, the last thing I was going to plug, at Jillian Lee Morality on Instagram and TikTok. My research assistants run a morality TikTok and Instagram reels for us, so that is a lot of fun as well. But yeah, like I said, come see me. I've got business cards. I can give you my information. Or wait to see me at the reception. I hope to see you all there. Thank you guys so much. My name is Jillian.
Thanks, everyone. Since Jillian's already broken the fourth wall completely, I'm going to be like Oprah and I'm going to wander around. So who has got a question for our excellent panel? Right. I shall come straight to the back.
Thank you. A question for Justin. So what is it that we're supposed to say to the shallow person that's rejecting your meta rule? You left me hanging on that one.
Great. Okay, so the shallow person, I think when the shallow people are on top and they have a complete monopoly and their viewpoint has a monopoly, there's not very much that we can do except maybe tend the fires on our own and hope to have a small influence. But I think at a time like this, when they can see that they're going to have to, and I think it's probably going to get even more intense with Republicans attacking and the schools and saying we're going to do these things at our schools, and it's going to the war is going to the cultural war is going to escalate. If we can say, look, if you want to be guaranteed to have your view heard, then you should embrace these values, and that way you get a chance to have your view heard as well as other people. And I think that's always a better bet for them than just losing. Whereas if they're already winning, they're probably just going to say no. So I think that we should seize the moment of the big conflict to, since we're always going to be in a minority, but I think when the big waves are coming, we can sort of surf between them and I think help establish some positive institutions that we hope will last until they're needed again.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Who's up next?
Hi. Thank you, everybody. So I'm wondering a little bit about each of your thoughts about distribution points here. So, I'm sure all of you are familiar. There's research shows that these sorts of interventions, whether they're delivered through an app or a game or in-person sort of engagement, and I'm generalizing when I say these sorts of interventions, but they can have these sort of durable effects, somewhat durable. They work relatively well. In the short form, reducing affective polarization or maybe inculcating some set kind of change in reasoning habits or what have you. But part of the challenge that a lot of people face is that people don't organically come to these sorts of either apps. There are all sorts of ways that we can use our time digitally, and people don't tend to want to use that to have more structured arguments or learn about their moral psychology. schools, systems of education have their own sort of challenges in implementing these things. But so this is the open-ended version of this question is what are you thinking about in each of your interventions in terms of the contact points, this sort of scalability, if you will, and how this is going to reach people for each of the ends that you're each kind of aspiring to?
I can start with this one. Do I need the mic? Do I need the mic? Yes. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yes.
I know, it's hard to tell, isn't it?
Yes. So the intention that I had first was because of being in the education, Faculty of Education, and working with TAs before. So that would be part of a professional development, educational development. Wasn't really looking to have something more like a commercial and be, downloaded from, for anyone. So that would be more for professional development in education. And then instead of having just being a form that I could give and people would be in groups and discuss, that could be something more interactive, dynamic, that they can create a certain virtual community and revise and bringing their ideas and their input they had into the meetings they would have. So that is more a pedagogical tool in the sense that I have in mind. More close in the sense of being more for professional development among TAs, teachers, pre-served teachers, and so on.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Being a moral psychologist, I'll tell people that, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, tell me what you think of this moral dilemma. Like, what do you think of this situation?" But then they don't seek this stuff themselves. So you're so interested in it, but how do we bring it in? And I think program implementation across everywhere that we can. I mean, I think some of the strongest moral communities that we find that can get along with these differing perspectives are things like West Point, like the Army, like I said before, religious communities, people that they're learning this, and it's a core part of their schooling. Kent Place on the East Coast is one that school is really good with this, where character building is a core part of what they teach. And I think that is what forms the strongest moral communities. It's hard to get somebody when you're just like, hey, come do this workshop to learn about perspective taking. They're like, that does not sound interesting. But they like to learn about it when they are. And so having things, in higher institutions, specifically having some kind of, there's weird credits, you have to get how many language credits or a cultural credit or stuff like that, having some kind of you take one of these character education programs. And I think that even it sounds a little like implementation, forcing them into it, but once they get there, they really like it and it's really advantageous. But you're right, the problem is getting the systems in place to be able to do this kind of work.
Thank you. Let's see. I've been teaching a course on critical thinking at Rutgers, and for some time I was teaching a really large version of it that had between 100 and 160 people. And I brought in some of this material, and I wanted to see how people would react. I mean, to me, with the chance to look at things from different perspectives and to see, oh, maybe I've been wrong all this time, what could be more exciting? And so I'm thrilled about that. But then I would have a lot of students who didn't seem to care that much, and a few of them would always come at the end of class and they'd want to talk to me about something, and I would say, hey, why don't you talk to each other about this? And finally, they would come to my office hours and hang out for a long time, and they said, oh, the semester is over. So I said, next semester, if you like, we can arrange some times when you can come by and we can continue to have these discussions openly. And some of them were just thrilled, and they actually turned for one entire year. It was 2 different 3+ hour sessions every week that they couldn't keep away, and they were trying to get their friends to come. And so how many people are doing this? I think it seems like it's as far as I've seen, it's maybe 5 to 10% of the students are really, really excited about this. They don't understand why other people aren't totally excited. Isn't this the point of going to university? And for most other people, they don't care that much. So I kind of, my feeling now is that we're not going to, originally when I got into teaching, I thought maybe this stuff is so great, we can eventually get everyone doing this. I don't think so anymore, but I think that maybe maybe the best that's ever going to be is 5 to 10%. And if you've got that many people who are excited about this, great. And there's no benefit to them for coming. It's not like they get any credit or anything. So my sense is we can at least try to reach those people, make it known that it's there, and maybe when somebody's trying to dominate the discussion and try to force everybody to believe something, as people have said here at HXA and other capacities, just letting other people know that that's not everybody's cup of tea and that there's no room for that here. Maybe that'll be enough. I hope so.
Who's up next?
Hey, this is for Justin, and I really enjoyed your talk. I struggle with this a lot. This issue is something I spend way too much time thinking about. And one of the things I noticed about you're speaking a lot about reasoning between individuals, it seems, and I think a lot about reasoning within institutions. So I was thinking about the no one gets final say. And sometimes to get to the goal of truth, we have to put our foot down and just make a decision. And we think about the history of science, the empiricism versus rationalism debate in the 17th century, like a foot was put down and we made progress. And so there is a certain amount of exclusion that has to happen for free inquiry to actually make progress. And I'm wondering if you have sort of thoughts on how that plays into your theory. As institutions, can we say like, hey, this is where we're going and this is just what we're doing and exclude voices? Or how do we create free inquiry within the bounds of that goal of progress and truth?
I mean, I actually am a pretty hard line guy about this. And, my understanding from talking to somebody who, a biologist, who was telling me about I guess it's called the American Biological Association. I'm trying to recollect a conversation I had with him about 20 years ago. But he told me that at their annual meetings, there was a time at the end when anybody could go up to a microphone and make any point or make any kind of argument whatsoever. So, there were some wacky people who would come up there and make these points. I mean, the way I see it, if somebody wants to defend the geocentric model or creationism or young Earth creationism, I mean, people have tried all kinds of arguments to support young Earth creationism, and they have failed they all have good responses to them. And in the end, people come with responses to responses. But in the end, there are just so many arguments that just clearly don't get off the ground. And once you've played that through with somebody who knows the situation pretty well, that's pretty well the end of it. And so the only way that you can continue to maintain some of these views is by just repeating stuff that's already been asked and answered. And so I think, okay, well, I don't think that if somebody wanted to if somebody were applying for a position in biology or something like that, I would say, okay, well, if you believed some of the stuff, okay, well, can you respond to all the arguments that you've had so far, and can you respond to the arguments that we have against this? And I think if the answer is yes, then sure, let the person in. It might be good to have some wacky theories around that we can that'll keep other people on their toes. So I don't think we need to solve that by gatekeeping, but I know that that's not what everybody thinks.
There is another issue, though. I mean, yes, we want people to make a case based on evidence and reason, but they've also got to do it honestly.
Right.
People like Andrew Wakefield or David Irving will produce reasons and they will produce evidence, but they fabricated the evidence.
Right, yeah. So this is one of the things that I got all sort of tongue-tied because I was talking for way too long and I realized I had to wrap it up. But I was going to say that, yeah, the kind of thing that should be a stigma against you is if you're known to have fabricated evidence or repeatedly ignored, every time you've said something, somebody raises an objection against you and you can't answer it, but you keep pretending that you haven't heard it the next time. Things like that, I think, should diminish your credibility.
Who wants to come in next? One of the things I've always found, and I'm sure we've all experienced this in terms of engaging students in anything, when you start veering off on something that's of great interest to you and less interest to the student, seems, Professor, is this going to be on the test? So how do you incorporate this into assessment so that students will care about it?
It's actually something I've thought about. So you're looking at that point for some kind of outcome. How do we judge that this worked, that students liked it, that like this is something meaningful to do? And something I've thought about, so they have high school and undergrad ethics bowl teams, and they go and they compete and they do this kind of thing, and they're given some kind of case, and one side has to argue the pro and then the other one argues the aff, and they go back and forth a little bit, so kind of like debate, but it's about ethics cases like this. And so then the judges score it, but it's like, how do judges score if someone's good at ethics? But it's stuff like, you know, they recognized the viewpoint of the other team. Like, that's something you have to do in it. If you're arguing point A, you have to say, like, you know, point B would say this, but here's our rebuttal to that. Like respectful dialogue, they engaged really well with the questions that the other side proposed, things like that. So that is my line of thinking, that we could look at it in some kind of way like that, like pick out things like intellectual humility, things we talk about here, open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, constructive disagreement, that kind of stuff, and having an evaluation based on that versus just how many dogs do you have when you subtract them from 8 cats or whatever we did in math. Who knows how we did that a long time ago. But yeah, that is my thought. I don't know if you guys
I would say your question was not so clear for me, actually.
So I was asking, how do you incorporate these ideas into assessing students so that because that is often what I find students are motivated either if it's going to be on the test or it will help them get a job.
Yes.
Those are the two things that keep them focused.
Yeah, it's being very pragmatic.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, in terms of the belief shifting app that have been created, for example, right? That could be a reflection, can be used as a self-reflective approach, even compare with the other peers. They can put it into groups and they could first complete the form, and then they can have discussions and see each other's, and then they can write a reflective piece. That could be parts of, using as form of assessment in the sense of group assessment, not only individually.
Yeah, I love that. I use reflections all the time on in-class activities, and increasingly I'm doing it because ChatGPT can't write those.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you'd have to record the activity in class.
I always play, you know the idea of the red team, that so you set up something to be foolproof, and then you have a team that comes in and tries to foil to destroy the plan. So I always play this kind of game when I'm putting together my assessment. So for instance, if I wanted to test whether somebody could fairly assess whether somebody has committed a bad form of the ad hominem move, then I might have a whole bunch of ones where a couple of cases where the person had, and a couple of cases where the person hadn't, and say, which ones are which. Or I might have one thing that I often do is I have a dialogue on a final exam between 2 different people, and they have 13 different passages that it's just part of their conversation, and then 10 of those they represent an argument form that sometimes a fallacy and sometimes not. They have to say whether it does or doesn't. And they have a list of 10 different argument forms. 3 of them are just decoys that look a lot like things that they might have seen, and they just have to do a mix and match. So it's actually pretty easy to grade, even if you've got 100 or so. But it's very challenging, and you can't really bluff your way or bullshit your way through it.
Okay.
Thanks. I kind of want to actually follow up on that same question, because I had just spent a couple of weeks ago in a different conference which was specifically aimed at developing assessment tools around civil discourse work. And so first of all, it became a problem. There was 12 of us, and we couldn't even agree on a definition of what civil discourse was. But that there were a lot of various, and I'm very much, I come to it as kind of a skeptic that we can really translate a lot of these sort of like qualitative attributes like intellectual humility into real hard, brute assessment metrics. However, a number of the people who were there, at least 3 of them had run ethics polls, had managed to like convince me it's like, okay, it's fine that we can understand that there's a lot of these things that we're not ultimately going to be able to measure. Like, did we actually make some sort of valuable contribution to democracy or anything like that? But based on some resource, we can measure what it is that we can measure. The problem, one of the things that I'm really just kind of struggling with, and I think this is something that was implied in almost all of your talks, is that really developing the critical thinking skills and to be able to sit into a room with a lot of people with whom we might disagree with and then end up actually having a productive conversation, building something, that isn't something that we just learn. It takes discipline. It's something that's cultivated time and time again. You mentioned like military and or religious institutions or all these various places where you just have the practice of continuing to do it over and over and over again. And I'm not necessarily sure if there's an easy way that we can impart that into students, at least in our roles in the university, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I forgot we had a mic. I think implementation in all levels. So like I said, higher education, but I've done a lot of work with teaching children philosophy, which is super fun to do. And that's a great way to start that early of like, how can I see this differently or how can I wrestle with those? Because you're right, it's something that has to be taught and exercised. And there's lit on like, it being connected to kinesiology, like cultivating virtues in the same way that you work out, you know, where you have to keep doing it. So I think, I don't want to say by the time you get to college, it's too late, but like we were talking about, like it has to be central to that learning. And I think it has to be central to that learning even before we get to the point where we are now. Like start doing things like teaching children philosophy or like middle school curriculum, high school workshops where you can, you know, do descriptive measures, things like that. But making it more of that core. Yeah, I don't know about your generation if there's hope, but good try for the future ones.
I would like also to add, well, core beliefs are really hard to change, right? The ones that are really when you're, you know, very young, from your family, the values. So these things we know. So that's one of the reasons the number of studies about belief systems are increasing, because if you're coming, I had students coming from conservative household background, and sometimes in their reflections they say they feel very uncomfortable with the ideas that they have in the university because it's not matching what they were taught when they were kids. So the problem is that certain voices, for example, more marginalized voices like conservatives, right now they are marginalized. Students cannot really make their ideas explicit and have a conversation. So this is, I think, one of the problems. I'm talking now mostly about what's going on in the Canadian context. That's where I'm coming from. So the idea of having a kind of form that I showed that you could see is that start students writing and creating a conversation among each other, because right now they don't have, and they are afraid to. So, and the reason that to think of a pre-service teachers, that would be a good spot. But we are having really very difficult moment in which the teachers' college, you have just one type of, you know, beliefs, doctrines, theories, I would say. We have just one line of theories, and other theories are not being approached. So we needed to approach all theories and be able to think about them, evaluate them, and see the points, what is positive, what's negative, advantages. So this is why critical thinking is very important. We have to try to keep cultivating it as much as we can, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. I understand that's very difficult to change. We always change it, as in the dynamic systems, all right? We are beings. We are even biologically always changing, and so change is part, I suppose, of our growth. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. This has been a fantastic panel. We've had really great contributions here. Great start to the conference. I'm sure you'll all be going to a lot more sessions. Join your discipline communities online. Join your campus communities and your regional communities. That's the the opportunity for the interdisciplinary collaborations that Jillian was talking about. So thanks to everyone on the panel and for everyone for participating.